This will go, I've been putting them into a YouTube link, but for the most part, I'll send them out in the Substack, which is for me, it'll get a few hundred views. The YouTube, not so much, but the YouTube link makes it easy for people to access. But for the most part, before we dive into talking points, welcome to Mind of a Lion, DINGO. Happy to have
Thank
you
you.
on. And for those who will be listening, you have a Substack at the bottom, bowtiedingo.substack.com. High level, so it mentions B2B and SaaS sales. Where are you looking to take that Substack long term? 6 months out, 12 months out?
Absolutely. So yeah, it dives at the moment into sort of the SDR business development role, which is cold calling, appointment setting. I plan on sort of building it out to a bit more of a general thing to also show the account executive role, so actually doing demos, closing deals within SaaS sales. And then I've also done a fair bit of online businesses selling software or products. So I plan on, and I've mentioned this once or twice in the Substack, but I haven't released it yet, a series on actually building something out, sharing as much detail as I can without doxing myself, to show
Right.
sort of some of the newer people in the jungle. Some of this stuff really isn't as hard as we're led to believe. You really can just make money reasonably quickly. I saw another animal in the jungle, bow-tied hog, posted something about doing white label SaaS. So someone else builds the product, you just slap your branding on it, market it, and sell it. And I thought, okay, that's a reasonable idea for this. I'm getting 70 American monthly recurring revenue from about 1,000 emails sent with no follow-up at all on a pretty cheap product. So it can be easy. So those are the things I plan on doing.
I guess I haven't even thought about that, white labeling or private labeling, not e-com products, but a digital high margin reoccurring revenue. Says that's interesting. What would that look like? Like an example in caveman speak, high level. What would be an example of that?
Yeah, so it would be along the lines of, let's say there are CRMs out there, because I've noticed a couple of white label CRMs when I was sort of just looking into it briefly. What you do is sign up with that company. They'd have some sort of partnership program. Usually the companies have a landing page builder, or you can just forward it to your own one with some sort of web builder that you use yourself, or if you're good at coding, just upload it to a web hosting server and create your own website. And they would handle sort of all of the tech side, usually some customer support, customer service, or you can run that yourself. All you'd need to do is create a landing page, your branding, marketing material, things like that. Forward all of their, forward your DNS to connect with their services. Probably sign up for something like Stripe or PayPal, some sort of payment processor, and then you sell that service. So you need to use the product yourself, figure out how it works, be prepared to answer any questions. But it's reasonably simple on the macro level. It's a reasonably simple idea with quite a bit of earning potential.
So in that white labeling SaaS products, you're focusing on automating or streamlining the lead generation process, prospecting, and providing qualified leads for whatever company is selling the actual SaaS product.
Yeah, absolutely. So they maintain all of the SaaS, the actual technology side, but even when your customers log in, they still only see your logo. They're still on your domain. They don't see that underlying company that is doing the dev. So it's actually pretty interesting, and that is the main idea: automating outreach, automating lead gen, figuring out the best way to have it growing without needing day-to-day involvement or a lot of time suck.
Right. That ties into, of course, listeners, SaaS Capo, his pinned tweet at the top of his profile. He goes through a thread on how to build. Well, it's really doing both ends, finding startup SaaS companies and automating lead generation, booking appointments, that BDR role, if you will, SDR role for these companies, and getting to the point where your focus is actually on finding clients, finding new SaaS startups who will pay you for each booked call, if you will. So it kind of sounds like you and SaaS Capo are nibbling away at the same idea or concept from different approaches.
I think so. And having read his pinned tweet, there's quite a bit of gold in there. I do recommend anyone who hasn't looked at that to do so. Whether the lead gen agency that he's suggesting is for you or not, that idea of how to do lead gen automated or semi-automated is definitely a worth reading about.
And tying in with Bowtie Bull, it fits the matrix in SaaS, software as a service, as for listeners, higher margin and reoccurring revenue. So like real estate, as an example, would be maybe higher volume, a higher margin, but it's not necessarily recurring, while selling, say, magnesium supplements might be recurring, but it's not so high margin.
Exactly. It sort of walks the line in between them that I think is exactly what you need to if you want to maximize your time and money. I think that's why Bull has written about it reasonably extensively and continually promotes it, because it is a good way to get rich, really.
Absolutely. Percentage of equity. So tying into sales, the concept of course, Bull and many in the jungle talk sales. They talk equity, ownership, entrepreneurship. And I think a big draw for younger guys, especially coming out of school, is sales is that percentage of revenue. You're paid for performance, right? You sell 100K in revenue, you sell a million, 10 million, you make more, you're not capped. What is it that drove, or really how did you end up in SaaS Sales, DINGO? Without getting too specific, mentioning your company, what was that rough path?
Yeah, absolutely. So what can I say? I did computer science in university, actually, but as reasonably okay as I am at the computer science side, I can't compete with the top 10% in that field. It's just not within me. And Bull does continue to write about being the top percentage in your field or whatever niche you're in, because then that's really where any money or success is. So I started looking at what I can do instead that can allow me to continually leverage those skills, but without being in direct competition with the super geniuses I was actually running into in that field. So it was data science that I majored in.
Okay.
From there, I sort of took an in-between job, which wasn't intentionally an in-between job. It was sales within finance, but it ended up sort of.
Not bad.
Yeah, I can't really complain about it, but what I did find was there was a lot of red tape and restriction about when I can do things, what I can do. It was a very corporate life, as you can imagine, which is not the worst thing ever, but it didn't give me any free time to explore other things or even the opportunity to improve the way I did things internally at the company. So it was very inefficient as well. I ended up looking externally. It was fortuitous that I'd been considering B2B, like SaaS sales, for a while, but there was a mix of seeing a post on Wall Street Playboys at the time, Bowtie Bull, about SaaS sales. I think it was a guest post, actually. I'm not sure who wrote that. As well as sort of efficiency, mentioning the career path. It gave me sort of that jolt of, okay, I should probably start looking into it seriously instead of just this thought in the back of my mind. Jumped on LinkedIn, already had a resume good to go, started applying randomly, and
Let me
got
dive in
a
LinkedIn.
yeah. LinkedIn is something for the past like 5 years I've used every day, and it has made me a lot of money. I appreciate that company. Um, yeah, went through an interview process. It was actually the first company I interviewed with ended up being the winner. Really smooth process. So did an SDR job for about a year and a half, a bit longer than I would have liked to, but I've heard worse.
Right.
Did did a random marketing role in the middle just because it seemed like something that was interesting because I wanted to learn more about that side of the business, and then jumped into the AE role straight from that. So it was uh, I got sorry, figuring out what's best to share. I've worked primarily in the MarTech space, so marketing technology.
Okay. So you started to more focus or specialize in some copywriting and also that more optimizing prospecting, optimizing lead generation, getting someone from, let's say, the Twitter analogy, impression to a click on the profile, if you will.
Absolutely. So we use sort of internal sales engagement tools. There are things out there. It's not the one I use, but things like Outreach.io and SalesLoft. I've linked to both of them in my most recent Substack on their emails, but they track everything. They track open rates, they track click rates, reply rates. So you can sort of A/B test your day-to-day outreach. And so my week, I'm constantly looking at, okay, how is this follow-up doing compared to others? Are people replying to me? Am I closing more deals that way? Are more prospects coming back to me in cold outreach? And so the longer you do this, if you just look at those stats, you can optimize reasonably well. And from that point, your sales targets are predictable. You can forecast more effectively, and you know what you're going to make even in commission.
Right. Backwards analysis from the close all the way back to the, oh, if I reach out to this number of leads and qualify X, I get to Y, meetings and so on. And I've had more, I think, limited experience than you in B2B SaaS, and it's so far it's metrics, especially in that prospecting role. It's sales is heavy metrics, for better or worse.
Absolutely. Something my managers all the way through my career have said is sales is a numbers game, which it really is. You can have bad outreach and you can do a lot of connections, or you can have good outreach and only do a medium number of connections. You're going to get the same outcome. So finding that line in the middle, but it's all understanding the metrics and playing to it.
Finding that balance between quantity and quality.
That's right.
Absolutely. So you've gone remote, as we were discussing offline,
Mhm.
in Australia, like myself and many of us post-COVID. How is let's say the game changed a little bit or been modified because not only you are remote, but many of your target audience or clients are also in a more remote centric environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So my day to day is not too affected because I was working sort of. I don't do any outside sales. It's always been over phone and Zoom. But the way I connect with people is definitely different with nobody in the office. Even if I do get through to a gatekeeper, someone's reception, someone else at the company asks to be passed through, quite often people just aren't there or don't have numbers that can be transferred to. So I've definitely, it's sort of a threefold approach. I'm getting a lot less direct numbers, or, well, less numbers that I can get transferred to people. So heavier emailing, heavier social selling, LinkedIn outreach, things like that, as well as sort of relying a bit more on tools like Zoom Info or Lucia, which are tools that give you direct phone numbers to people as well as emails and things like that. But they sort of connect to a number of public databases. At some point, someone's clicked, yes, I agree to these terms and service without ever reading them. And in it, they get permission to share that with a database. So I've had quite a bit of success just directly calling people with numbers that aren't really public, which is still somehow GDPR compliant, but I haven't looked into the legality of that.
And then ask for forgiveness and permission sometimes.
Absolutely. It's a fun conversation when people ask how you got my number. It's always it's always a decision between, oh, I found it on my CRM. I'm not sure how it got here, or, well, actually, we have a tool that connects with public databases. Had some weird conversations building off from that.
You mentioned your data science background, computer science, and that top 10%, let's say top 1%, those guys in that comp sci programming background. When you say you can't keep up with them, what does that look like? I'm trying to get a picture in my mind. Is it some guy strung out on Adderall who's programming 12 hours a day and he's just so fast and you just can't, so much momentum that's not something?
I think that's definitely part of it. It's a big, at least where I am from, is a big part of the culture of overworking yourself to that point where you're pumping out so much that even if I had the same, let's say, level of processing power, I couldn't keep up with the amount of work. But for me, it was just, I'm looking at these guys who are faced with a problem that needs to be solved, and their brains are working a million miles an hour, and just solve an issue that's going to take me sort of a week of analysis to figure out how to approach it. And they're just like, okay, we do it this way, jump on the computer, write a few lines of code, and it's fixed immediately. And I just realized sort of, I think Bull keeps saying, don't bet against geniuses. Those are the people I was seeing, and my brain, I don't feel like I'm a slouch in that area, but I'm not a genius by any sense.
And anyone who is a genius probably isn't calling themselves a genius.
No, probably not.
You're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I'm not. What's the Dunning-Kruger effect?
So, named after these two whatever scientists who, I want to say, discovered it, but they put the math behind it, is when you plot a chart of competence versus confidence, in other words, knowledge versus courage or ego, you find it creates a cup and handle shape. So initially you learn a little bit and all of a sudden you get real confident. You think you got it figured out. And then as you really learn more, you realize how much you don't know. And your confidence creates that cup shape and starts coming back down. So those who know the least are actually usually the most confident, and those who know a lot are a lot more humble and wary of what is it that I don't know that could get me into trouble. And this applies. They found this in not only sales, aviation, engineering, any domain, any subject. It's confidence versus competence. It's a cup and handle shape, which is a whole nother tangent, but definitely would pull up a graph if I could in this format.
That is fascinating, and it definitely agrees with something I felt like I've known intuitively, and seen a few times in my life over and over again. So that's something I'm definitely going to look up after we jump off here.
Of course, now that I'm saying it, maybe I have to pump out a thread because, like, polyphasic sleep or whatever, something interests me. I'm like, hey, let me go. I know 70-80%. Let me go research and find the last 20 and kind of share over the jungle, see what happens. I'm curious so you mentioned that those top performers in comp sci, You pivoted to B2B sales, a little bit of marketing. Are you familiar with Scott Adams or the Dilbert comics?
Vaguely, yeah. I read the comics growing up, and I've seen him pop up occasionally.
Cool. So Bowles mentioned, he didn't name drop Scott Adams, but he's mentioned, be in the top 20% of 3 to 4 domains. So that's referring to Scott Adams popularized this term called talent stack. Talent
Talent
stack
stack.
is talent stack. It's where you take 2, 3 domains that you have skill in, where you're not the top 1% in any of them, but you're the top 20% in 3 domains. And you combine them, and the synergy of your talent stack creates a unique value proposition, specific knowledge that you have and you can offer that others don't. So in the case of Scott Adams, he's not the best comic strip cartoonist. He's top 20%. He's not the best in business, finance, econ background, but he's top 20%. He's not the best in satire and sarcasm in written comedy, but he's top 20%. And he combines those 3 domains to create the Dilbert comic strip, which is a unique value proposition, talent stack.
That is interesting. And it makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that it's coming from a cartoonist as well. I love that.
Right. It's a polymath. So it kind of sounds like you're almost dabbling at that without, someone putting a label on it like Scott Adams, but you're taking your programming, comp sci background, marketing, sales, and maybe some copywriting, and almost like you're trying to put the pieces together and make a unique niche for yourself.
In a way, yeah. It's I guess it's in the dark, blind, stumbling towards what Scott Adams has theorized. I'm taking sort of my data science background and the little bit of marketing work I've done to figure out the best ways of outreach, continually improve and progress to get higher close rates, higher booking rates, things like that. Not just looking at my own things, but I've gotten access to the data across all of the reps at my company, so I can pull the data in from that and work with them. And so I can see what's working, what's not, go into larger data sets from the internet. Quite a lot of sales data has been published, so it's a good field to look at and sort of just improve in that aspect. But then you can also flip it on its head, and if you're starting your own business, that marketing side might be predominant, but the sales and data side are going to support it quite heavily as well. So yeah, I think in a less formal, maybe less efficient way, I've been stumbling at the same direction. Maybe gives me another thing to think about consciously as I'm moving forwards now.
Something to keep in the back of the mind.
Absolutely.
Kind of pivoting here, how did you end up in the jungle? And also Bitcoin, but at least we'll start with, how did you find Wall Street Playboys, Book Type Bull? How did you get into this rabbit hole?
Back in university, I had a flatmate who.
Hold up. Translation for Americans, Canadians listening. That's college and that's roommate, right?
Yes and yes. I appreciate the translation from Australian speak. Yeah, so back in college, I had a roommate who I got along with reasonably well. That was, back late teenagers, early adulthood, where I'm getting into things like game and approaching women, trying to figure out social aspects of my life, because that's what's important back then, at least to the average person. I'd say
20-year-old guy.
Exactly. And so I spoke with him a lot about that, jumping into those sort of topics. And back then, Bull did have some some posts on the blog about that, and my roommate recommended reading through Wall Street Playboys. So I read that. I read a bit more further into his finance, their finance articles, their just their general life advice. The way they broke it down really fit well with the way I like to structure my life. I like to think in the same sort of systems that they write in. And so I've just sort of followed it over the years from there. But I think that roommate has made me a lot of money over the years by introducing me to Bowtie Bull.
And then Bowtie Bull took care of the rest.
Exactly. But to answer the second part of the question about how I got into Bitcoin, it's a little bit more of a sad story, but also a story where I pay back that roommate with a lot more money. I actually learnt about Bitcoin because I've been a computer nerd for most of my life.
Right.
Really, really early. Like I might be sharing too much here. People can probably figure out my age, but I was still living at home with parents when I discovered Bitcoin. It was worth about 50 cents per Bitcoin. And I didn't even have a debit card. Like I couldn't buy it.
Right.
So there's this little kid going to his parents like, hey, there's this internet investment money that's worth 50 cents. Can I pump $100 into it? Because that was my life savings at that point.
Right.
And the worst part is they said yes. They said yes. Kid, put $100 into internet money that's worth 50 cents each. Get 200 of them.
Right.
You know what? I didn't do it. I was fucking lazy, and I'm sometimes it's hard to stop thinking about that.
Right.
But from there, I followed it over the years. I've definitely jumped into it. Maybe not when Bitcoin was 50 cents, but definitely not where it is now. So I've made some money from there and introduced that same roommate to Bitcoin, and we both started investing in it during college. So it's been a fun ride, but damn if I don't regret not just going for it. It was sitting right in front of me.
Right. I feel like a lot of guys have that. In whatever point in time they discovered Bitcoin, there was a period of time from learning about Bitcoin to being fully, their mind being fully invested in the protocol, in the fundamental change when you have a separation of money and state, where they're like, okay, this is internet money, to months or years later, oh, I need to go all in.
Absolutely. Like back then, I was a lot more political, as sort of teenagers are, and all people at some point are. But I was going through that rebellious part of life where I was really into what was it? Anarcho-capitalist ideas, the idea of personal freedom and capitalism. And so the online community at that point jumped onto Bitcoin very early and was talking about the idea of decentralized money and how it'll help the world. So it was definitely setting me up for transitioning to this decentralized way of living, which I appreciate, even if I'm not as political anymore.
Sovereign individuals. Fix
Exactly.
the money, fix the world. Freedom of money, freedom of speech.
That's right.
How is your... And I don't think you need to give a specific year, but from the point at which at least most of your net worth, you went all in Bitcoin, crypto, however long ago that was, how has your mindset changed since then, if at all? Your perspective riding that roller coaster.
Yeah, definitely. It's the majority of net worth. It's been A little while, not as long as I wish it was, but at the beginning it was purely, this is a great investment. I was sold on the protocol, the concept of decentralized economies, DeFi, maybe not DeFi by those terms back then, but that concept I was sold in. So I just started putting all of my new earnings into crypto for a while there. But it was more to convert back to fiat currency. And
Oh, okay.
I did do that quite a bit, but as time has progressed, I've done that less and less to completely stopping, um, because there's just no reason to bring it back at this point when I'm self-sufficient with fiat currency without needing that, and I'm losing a lot of potential by bringing it back.
Cash
At
flow
some
security.
point, exactly. At some point, I think I realized what Bull has been saying, which is if you're uh, if you're defining your net worth based on fiat currency and you're investing in crypto to convert it back, you're missing the point. So it's been, I'd say it's been about a year and a bit that I've been going all in without the intention to bring it back at any point.
So maybe the post-COVID quantitative easing to infinity of the central banks has kind of solidified that idea of not going back to fiat.
I think it has, definitely.
So
That's been a big part of it.
now I haven't been around. When Bitcoin was 50 cents, was I still wetting the bed? No, I wasn't that young, but I was around in all in with what I did have in the 2017 run, and at that time I was like, oh, mostly XRP, XLM. I'm like, so I was using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to buy and sell. I won't get specific, but I think you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
And my profits, I would in Bitcoin, I would convert to altcoins because I'm like, oh, these are cheaper transactions, they're faster. And also it seemed 2017, it was the general mindset of you're going to buy Bitcoin to then sell for a profit in fiat. In other words, it's simply a speculative investment to gain more dollars or Australian dollars. But now it seems a lot more people are onto the idea of no, Bitcoin is not an offensive strategy. You're not driven by greed as much as you're driven by fear of fiat. You're buying Bitcoin to exit fiat. You're not buying Bitcoin to make more fiat in the long run.
Absolutely, and I think fear is the biggest motivating driver in human psychology. Maybe I'm wrong there, but yeah.
Insecurity, pain.
Exactly. Fun story, actually, just on a tangent. Again, without going into specifics, I also at some point was doing what you were doing, buying and selling. But I was using at that point Bitcoin as a means of making money, but also as a means of connecting with people in a way. So this was this concept that I had discovered. I was young. I was sort of making money from it, and I was trying to get more people involved because at some level I believed in the protocol and what it means for society. Maybe not as eloquently as I could put it today, but on some level. And so I was trying to convince people, hey, put some money into this. And so I got a couple of people into it, but I was going through old emails trying to find something from years ago in my sent folder the other day, and I found something else that's painful. I just found an email to one of my friends from back then. Sent the money for dinner. Should find $100 in BTC in your wallet, and that was the most expensive dinner I've ever purchased as well, turns out.
Puts in perspective well, of course we know the time value of money, but
Mm,
also the money value of time. It's like, wow, $100 I spent today on a steak dinner could be $1,000 a couple years from now, or 10 grand 5 years from now.
exactly. And it puts into perspective the difference between inflation and what the dollar would be worth in a couple of years versus Bitcoin and what it can be worth in a couple of years. Why it's not like you put it, an offensive strategy, but a defensive strategy.
Defensive strategy. Have you seen anything like the bow tie jungle community before, either offline or online?
No, I've seen online communities as you'd expect, and in a way it brings to mind a farmer's market, like a local farmer's market of different people coming together to purvey their own wares and build a community within a localized area. But taking that to the next step where it's completely location independent and anonymous so that you can bring in whatever wares, knowledge, experience you have to a wider group. So it's fascinating. I've seen hints of it in different things online, but never something exactly like this. And that's why I've been putting so much time into it.
Right, right. It's definitely sucking us into this rabbit hole.
It is.
I, Here's what I've observed. I don't understand exactly how it's happening, so I'm more thinking out loud here. It seems to be a filter where not only are you say following Bowtie Bull, but almost all the engagements, the conversations are people sharing experiences, knowledge, value. They're not just shooting the shit or complaining, or of course crypto Twitter can be pretty toxic as a whole. It doesn't seem to be that crap, if you will. And maybe there is, but I haven't really seen it. It's just people having productive, value-adding conversations. I'm not sure exactly the mechanics behind how that's happening without centralized, censorship or leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen like anonymous communities before, but
Sure, sure.
none that have lasted even this long without devolving into quite a shit show, to be blunt. Yeah, there are dramas on any online community. I've never seen any community just deal with it like, hey, stop that, and then completely ignore the person to continue value adding instead, which is fascinating.
Right, right. Decentralized, almost maybe censorship isn't the right word, but it's like if you're with your buddies and you're say out camping, you got like 5 friends, and
Mm.
maybe they're getting political, and then eventually the group's just like, bro, shut up. We don't need that negative energy here. We're just trying to have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's bringing to a large scale something that, to my personal experience, has only existed in small groups. That it's almost direct democracy, but that filter is exactly it. Also, something I wanted to pivot to because I've been thinking about it recently. I love that everyone has something to share. And something I wanted to mention on the podcast specifically was I also see low juggle animals mentioning love everything that's happening here, but I don't know if I know enough to share anything. And to that, I'd argue that it doesn't matter how much you know or if you are qualified, that's the job of the filter. I think our job is to share what we do know because it might someone value. Um, so just put something out there and see if it sticks.
Throw some shit in the wall and see what sticks.
Absolutely.
That that line there, I don't know if I have something to share. So that's word for word what Silverback said, and we're gonna jump on a call in like an hour or so from now, and it does seem like, and I feel almost like I can't keep up sometimes. Like you're talking to people and they got all these different deep knowledge, like Arctic Wolf with development, for example, or Ox with bodybuilding, and you're like, how am I supposed to keep up with these people? Sometimes I'm like, hey, step back. You're hanging out with the top 1%. Somehow they got here, they got through the filter, and you're with some of the most high caliber, motivated, but also conscientious people in the world. And we're all trying to make the life a little better one day at a time.
Absolutely. There are definitely days where I log on to Twitter and look at the jungle, and it's not the right word, but almost intimidating looking at the vast amount of knowledge that is being directed at the jungle. But it's a net positive, not a net negative. There's no bad about that at this point, at least, and I hope it stays that way. So I add the little bits I can. I don't add anything for computer science or developing because of people like, was it Silver Fox? Forgive my Arctic Fox. Sorry, Arctic Fox.
Arctic Wolf.
Arctic Wolf.
Arctic
Arctic Wolf.
The Russian web developer. Yeah.
Yes, incredible stuff though. I'm not great with that memory, unfortunately, but yeah, there are people who do it better than me. There are people who do SaaS sales better than me, actually. There are some extremely advanced people within the jungle. So I share what I can, but I would also say don't take all of your knowledge from one source if there are multiple available, because there's a treasure trove in what we're a part of right now.
It is a treasure. It's the golden potluck at the end of the Irish rainbow.
Absolutely.
Where do you kind of see, and I don't think anyone knows the answer to this question, and if they did, I wouldn't believe them, but it was spitballing a theory on where the jungle might be a year from now.
Yeah, it's interesting because we are very much in the infant stages of the jungle. I think the way I see it, or at least I have it sort of very loosely planned in my mind, is there's a lot of free content out there and a couple of businesses growing within the jungle. I imagine the free content is going to continue, and I think it's a mainstay of why people are interested in the jungle, but I imagine the monetization is going to improve. As Paul mentioned, it's a decentralized economy, or a town that they have helped build. What I'd expect is not just things like bow-tied sponges, Sponge Store, or the Degenimals NFTs, or any of these businesses that for the most part are reasonably centralized in the way they are run, even if some things about them are decentralized. But I like the idea of what Bull is doing with the DeFi Substack, where it's anonymous people that can come in and build that, and they will pay, but are not technically employees. They're not contracted. They have no repercussions if they suddenly stop, other than no longer getting money. And without getting too in depth, I can see businesses like that popping up where you have a product or a service and people can come and go to make money, and the talent will stay if they see a reason to be part of that project. And I see the jungle as being a ground where people can go in between these different projects. Yeah. So that's a top line of where my mind has been around the future of the jungle.
So, yeah. Have you read or familiar with Sovereign Individual, the book?
I have it on my reading list. I haven't dived into it yet.
All right, take whatever reading list you have and put Sovereign Individual at the top. It will connect so many dots for you and any readers, listeners, both what's been going on with the jungle, Bitcoin, and at the macro level as a whole. Without going down on that tangent, Sovereign Individual, they they talk about this transition from the industrial age to information age, and you mentioned projects, DINGO. So they foresee a world where large employers are leftover baggage of the industrial era, because in the industrial era you get economies of scale. So that overhead of having all these administrators, or say an individual SDR, you've got to pay their health benefits and their vacation time and all this other stuff. Versus in the future, it'll be like movies, how a film is put together like a project. You bring in the actors and the producers and the writers, and once that movie is done, the project is over, you disband with no expectation of necessarily continuing to stay employed together. And it does seem with the DeFi Substack that is an example proof of concept. Virtual corporations are really just projects with people paying each other in crypto and sharing value. And if there's no more value, they move on.
That is fascinating, and it really does exemplify equality of opportunity, not of outcome.
Yes. Also, a pattern just in this conversation alone, mentioning sovereign individual, Dunning-Kruger effect, talent stack. These are patterns and observations you, DINGO, and others are seeing, but they haven't necessarily had a label or some scientific analysis to kind of put it in one sentence. Like they're seeing that, yes, taking 2 or 3 different skills what you're reasonably good at, combining them creates a unique value proposition, but they haven't had someone like Scott Adams come in and say, no, that's exactly what's happening. There's a formula to it, and there's a pattern to it. You, me, DINGO, Barb, everyone else are kind of ending up at the same conclusions, even if they have different language to describe the same thing.
That is very interesting. It is something that I realized during this discussion, actually, which is positive. I think it shows a sign that we're onto something bigger than just a community of fans of a blog. It also, from sort of, and I'm just thinking out loud rather than trying to continue a conversation here now, it also seems like it should accelerate the expansion of the jungle and the improvement of the people within it exponentially, as we can start to label some of the thoughts we've been having, teach other people about it if they haven't stumbled across this specific thought yet, and then systemize the way to then improve at that concept. So this is sort of a snowball type situation with things like sovereign individual and the Dunning-Kruger effect, maybe not that one, but talent stacking, things like that. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's food for thought. I reference it, but I don't. It's a lot to chew on, and I'm still chewing on it, one bite at a time.
Yeah, I have this notebook that I've been writing down the ideas that you've been mentioning here, but I got page after page of ideas for what I can personally do within the jungle. Some making money, some just a free value add. And I don't even know where to start. Some of them are more attractive than others. It's more of an open concept about any idea I have that is possible and a value add, free or not. There is so much possibility that I'm not really sure where to go from here, but there's a lot of hope.
There is a lot of hope. To quote Michael Saylor, Bitcoin is hope.
Bitcoin is hope.
Do you see any concerns with a transition? Like, for example, of course, we've seen with El Salvador the last week or so. Some rumblings with the IMF, World Bank. Do you see a difficult transition, a smooth transition? What kind of maybe blowback do you see as people try to find that sovereign individual lifestyle, that sovereign wealth, that decentralization.
Absolutely. I think the main thing, and this is probably on everyone's mind at some point within crypto and DeFi at least, is the relative infancy of that type of economy, where there are still a lot of rug pulls, a lot of, even if it's not a rug pull, a lot of mistakes from different projects and developers.
Mark Cuban yesterday.
That's the example I was going to bring up. I actually joined the Discord. I joined the Discord of Iron Finance to see sort of the internal backlash that's happening, because I was fascinated in the psychology of it. And there's,
What was that
it's
like?
it was a shit show. There are people still saying, there are still people on there yelling about how Iron Finance is going to bounce back and figure this out. There are people complaining about a rug pull. There are, rightfully so, unfortunately, people just continually spamming the suicide hotline because of how much money was lost. Right. I think that's our biggest obstacle, is there's a lot of pain and heartbreak ahead, and it needs to be weathered. I think it's a cycle that for any new industry has been dealt with. Like, I can't think of great examples, but a reasonable example is the data science, big data analytics industry. There was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where there are some real shady stuff going on for election manipulation through understanding of data, that there was a big blowback on the industry. A lot of things were closed off and no longer able to be used. But the industry continued because there is net utility in how everything works. I imagine we just need to weather a lot of financial loss for the new people, and even veterans are going to lose money to the wrong project at some point.
Of course.
Then I think the sovereign individual concept is going to take longer than I personally would like, because the concept of a corporation and a employee and solid money and a weekly, monthly paycheck is so ingrained in the way society works for hundreds of years, thousands of years, maybe. I'm not great with history.
A long time.
That it's going to take an entire cultural paradigm shift to make that a mainstay of society. And I think we wouldn't be here if it wasn't a possible thing, but it needs to be proven, and that's going to be a long, arduous road.
There's an easy way and there's a right way, and a decentralized future seems to be the right way, but not
exactly.
Easy. Absolutely. Could ramble on for hours here, Dingo. I appreciate you jumping on, and of course, would love to have more conversations in the future. But we'll, on the kind of time and length, call it soon. Any, at least for listeners, and from the Substack and YouTube link, Bowtied, Dingo, Substack, subscribe. Actually, was curious. I noticed you have a paywall as an option. Is that a plan to kind of keep it on a Substack a sort of donation option with the paywall, or eventually will you have separate content that's free and separate content that's premium?
The second one. At some point, I will do some premium content. The general weekly posts about SaaS sales and business that I have been doing are not going to stop. I don't think the premium will ever be the main focus of it. And I also imagine this paywall is actually limiting the number of subscribers I'm getting on the free one, because a lot of people just see it and click off. But on the page, I plan on going a lot more in-depth, creating products. For example, I personally used, as an SDR, I used a spreadsheet that sort of tracks who I'm now contacting, like a top 10, top 100 list, who I've contacted in the past with a reconnect, then a calendar-based system where I can send this email, book them at this time, and start to project months and sometimes years in the future how I'm going to hit my target. Things like that I'll give away to the paid Substack. And I also plan on releasing sort of a little bit more detail about that public business I'm building on the paid one. But for now, everything is free. There'll be like a month of warning before I even start to do anything paid. And the free stuff will continue, so there's no reason to worry about paying.
So to clarify, in the Bowtie DINGO Substack, you will eventually provide updates on that. Are we calling it like a white label SaaS lead generation business? I'm not sure the term here.
Yeah, white label SaaS business would probably be the best. I planned on releasing it this weekend, but I had a few non-jungle related things that I needed to work through, so it's been delayed by a week.
Absolutely. Better late than never. It's not like, hey, we're going to do it 5 years from now due to budget cuts, as the government would say. Awesome.
Yeah, 5 years from now, when everyone's already financially independent, I'll release a blog on how to become financially independent.
Awesome. Before we sign off here, Bowtie DINGO, thanks for jumping on with Barb for an episode of Mind of a Lion. I hope to have you on the show again, and of course, subscribe to DINGO's Substack.
Thanks for that, Bob. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Cheers.